Hello, my name is Connor. Today I would like to tell you what the year 2024 was like for me. Because I went mad that year. The very beginning of the year, I was actually in a very difficult situation. And at some point, I had some sort of breakthrough and started to deal much better with the situation that I was in. Found a new lease on life, started to move in a very positive direction. And it wasn't easy. A lot of negativity came up for me. Unfortunately, it got the upper hand because I hadn't learned how to effectively deal with my fear, as well as other trauma such as guilt and shame. So, as I was moving in this positive trajectory, negativity just built up, built up, built up, and that's when the madness started to increase, and I lost touch of reality. I had a mental breakdown, and I've since recovered from that. I'm not the same anymore. I feel like the direction I'm starting to move in is more positive again, though it's not quite as dramatic as it was in the spring of 2024 in particular. That was quite incredible. But I'll get into that. Just, I suppose the point that I want to make here is that I honestly believe that I was, at some point after the spring equinox, I was starting to channel what the Anglo-Saxons called woad and what the Welsh called awen, which is a term for specifically poetic inspiration. But for me, I think it expressed itself in experiencing flow, what we call in English flow. It's kind of like what the Chinese call Dao. It was quite incredible. I had a lot of experiences in 2024, which were, very miraculous. But yeah, unfortunately, because I hadn't learned to deal with my fear, and because I hadn't resolved a lot of emotional trauma, I fell, as it were, fell into madness. And I've since managed to come out of it. And this is my story of what happened, a few of the things that I did that helped me come out of it, which, if you're struggling with mental illness, you may find helpful. It is possible to come out of quite extreme madness. It may look different for you, but this is how it went for me. So, without further ado, my 2024. I mean, the start of the year for me, I wasn't in a good place. I had basically tried to set up a business and it had failed. And I was now required to look for work. Now, I'd been in this position before, but the difference was that back in 2021, I had come across a system called Human Design. And the basic principle of it is that everybody has their own way of going about things. There's particular ways that are right for you. There's no one size fits all when it comes to this. And the advice for my type is to trust my gut feeling on things. So I had been trying to practice with this, trying to learn how to get in touch with my gut feeling. And this caused frustration for me because I was looking for jobs and trying to decide which ones to go for based on my gut feeling. And the way it seemed to me was that it was basically rejecting most jobs. And my work coach was not having this. As far as the job centre is concerned, you are meant to just consider what kind of jobs you want to go for and just apply for as many as you can in the hopes that you will get one. So, but of course, in human design, it's stipulated for people of my particular type that you should only commit to things if your gut feeling gives you the go-ahead, because then basically lets you know whether you have the energy to actually sustain that. So this system that I had been working with myself was incompatible with the system. Around the same time, I was also practicing tantric masturbation, which involves masturbating but refraining from ejaculating. as a way to build up the sexual energy for creativity, for magical purposes, things like that. And I was also hugging trees because I felt disconnected from nature and wanted to feel more connected with nature. And while this was all going on, one day I drove out to the woods, which I hadn't done for a long time, and I meditated, which I was in the habit of doing. And then after I finished meditating, I hugged a tree that was next to me, and I had an erection, which was a surprising thing to happen for me. It immediately put me in mind of the pagan kings in this part of the world, who drew their virility from the land. And yeah, I felt like I was tapping into something here. Meanwhile, I had the idea to become a history tutor, because this could be one way that I would not have to work at a job and be self-employed, but still kind of have like a secure income, because it was unclear how quickly my own projects would be able to make me an income. So I'd contacted my cousin, and she said that she would get back to me. She wasn't getting back to me, and I was getting a bit agitated. It was like, I really should, contact her to, get her to help me with this kind of stuff. Something about it, though, didn't feel quite right. And this feeling grew stronger and stronger for me. And eventually I felt like something just felt very wrong. And I consulted a deck of oracle cards that we have featuring animals. And I asked the question, what's a message I need to hear right now? And the card that came up for me was Whale, which is follow your soul's path. Get on your soul path. You can't keep living your life driven solely by your ego. That was pretty hard-hitting. So I asked a follow-up question. How do I get on my soul path? And the card that came up was Antelope, which is for decisiveness. Learn to use your intuition, make decisions. So I was feeling really nauseous at this point. I had to step outside. I'd just eaten, you see. And I sat down with myself, thought about this, and the conclusion I came to was I'm not just going to try and please the job centre by becoming a tutor. It's not actually what I want to do. I'm just going to work on my projects. And so that's what I did the next day. Started working on my projects. And all these really negative emotions came up. So I watched a video by a YouTuber called Heidi Prieb. And she talked about CPTSD. And I don't actually remember what happened after that. All I remember, though, was that I had a barrage of negative thoughts. Extremely critical. Eventually it went away. Next day, basically the same thing happened. Started working on my projects. Had hard emotions come up. And watched the Heidi Prieb video, this time about toxic shame. And I remember this a bit more vividly, because I was sat right here and dealing with some very, very heavy kind of emotion. And I just had the thought come into my head, I have no choice. And it was so dark. And at some point, I just thought, I've had enough of this. I can't deal with this anymore. And so I went to run myself a bath. And then when I got into the bath, I thought to myself, I abandoned myself again. So perhaps I had not allowed these repressed emotions to leave. The next day was even worse, because I couldn't decide on anything, basically. I just sat down with myself, tried to work it out, think it through. I was like, what would Woden do in my situation? Conclusion that I came to was that he would probably do something crazy, like go camping. But I had arranged to go for a walk with my father the next day, and so I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to drive out to the local woods again. But I forgot to bring my boots, so I was like, no, I need to go home. I consulted the oracle cards again, and also the tarot cards. They seemed to indicate that the camping was a good idea. Ultimately, I did have thoughts actually say, what about your father? And I ultimately decided not to. And I did have quite critical thoughts berating me for playing it safe. I decided just to walk out to the park and just enjoy the night. I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't eat. I'd stopped being able to eat by this point. Yeah, the next day I did go for a walk with my father, and I felt awful, strong regret for not having gone camping. Turns out I probably could have done both, but obviously there was something about the spontaneity of it that just did not compute with my mind. At this point, it seemed as if there was a lot of craziness, and I was hoping, okay, this is going to die down a bit. Nope. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling something was awfully wrong, no idea what to do, just sat with it, feeling awful. And then at some point, a thought said to me, why don't you go skinny dipping at this place that you've gone with your friends before? And this time, I went and did it. I thought, I was like, oh, can I do this? And there wasn't really much resistance to it, so I was able to just go and do it. Immediately after, though, I got out, and then, I had thoughts saying, all right, that's enough of that now. No, we're not. Okay, this is too crazy. No, we're just going to go home and, So definitely I was triggering, I don't know, some sort of control matrix kind of thing in my mind. I don't really know how else to put it. It's just, I was just doing these very spontaneous things, going out into nature, things that I did not usually do. I did have a pretty good experience, actually. I went to meet, my sister was coming up to visit from England with her husband and kids, and went to meet them in Edinburgh. And the same day, my partner was flying back from Germany. She'd been away this whole time. I think I forgot to mention that. And, I went to see my family, and then, they went back to my dad's, and I was alone in Edinburgh. And I was like, okay, where am I going to go? And I ended up finding this place called Corstorphine Hill, which I knew was there. I just kind of got to it, and that was really interesting. And I just, once I got to the airport to pick up my partner, I felt like Superman. It was great. Just me being able to go off on my own and just find somewhere new. It was very empowering for me. I had tried, actually, before this, to just go and find somewhere completely new, near where I live. That didn't work out quite so well, I have to say. So it seems as if doing this kind of stuff, I found that I generally had an easier time spontaneously going to places that I had already been to or knew were there, rather than finding completely new places. Although I have managed that as well. And I also got a lot of motivation, even though I was still, having to look for jobs. I had a lot of motivation to work on my book and, start creating presentations for live streaming and things. So I was starting to get a lot of motivation. I was starting to handle both things at once, you could say. And one of my friends introduced me to a book called Wishcraft. This really started to shake things up for me, as it really started to get me to think about my dreams, and it's basically manifestation. It's a kind of magic. I started practicing this. Yeah, things are definitely seem to be going in a very good direction for me. And then I went over to Ireland to visit my mother and, relatives over there. Now, the point at which this went south for me was the fact that I decided not to bring my laptop with me, because I was afraid that something would happen to it, that it might get damaged or something on the way there. Mistake number one. On the bus to the ferry over to Ireland, I just started imagining the life that I want. And when I got onto the ferry, I had the idea I could just write it. Out, But I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm just going to go out onto the deck. So, when I was in Ireland, I woke up the next morning, and I was like, shit, what do I do? I'd been getting up very early at this point and exercising and working on my book, but now I had no book to work on, so I didn't know what to do. Did my exercise, but it was like, I was getting quite tired, and it was like, I basically lost the momentum. My momentum had been disrupted. I think it was specifically, I would have been probably okay if I had brought my laptop and was able to work on the book. But yeah, there's something about this whole experience that was just very disruptive for me. And I was still waking up early, and I had thoughts tell me, I was like, oh, work on your wishcraft thing, or do some wishcraft or something like that. And, I'd be there and be like, oh, I'm still really tired. Yeah, these kind of things. And I would still, I would go out swimming. I was doing things like, we were set to travel to another part of Ireland, and I decided I'm going to go and swim in a nearby loch and see if I can go for a swim and be back before we have to leave, which I managed. I did get spotted though, coming back by my uncle, but it was it felt like another wee success, I suppose. Then I had another one of these things though. It's like, I was really into archaeology, and I was meant to go visit this hill fort and some carvings and stuff like that. And I went to see it, and I just wasn't satisfied. And then I thought, we'd come through these really beautiful forests around the Killarney area. Kind of wish I'd gone to see those. So I felt really strong regret. And strong regret over having not brought my laptop, and strong regret for not having, written out my dream life on the ferry when I felt really motivated to do so. Things were getting quite emotionally tough. The day that we came back as well, I bumped into an acquaintance who is a support worker, and mentioned to him that I was looking for work, and he mentioned that his employers are always looking for people. So I thought, maybe this is a sign. It's a new moon. This could mean something for me, because I had considered support work before. And I had actually a surprising amount of energy for having been on a long journey that day. And, starting to go for a walk, and I had these thoughts saying to me, yeah, go and do some wishcraft or something like this. It's a new moon, like you really should, and so on. But I just thought, no, I want to just go for a walk. I think one of the things that I had been struggling with is trying to tell when I'm missing opportunities or when I'm just sort of putting pressure on myself, with these thoughts. Yeah, this is where things also started to go bad. So I applied for a job as a support worker, and I was crying while I was doing it, just thinking, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And my partner was uncharacteristically unsympathetic at the time, and I went ahead and applied for it. I didn't get that one, but I did come up with like a wee system. The gut feeling thing, I wasn't sure was working for me, so I tried to I came up with this completely by myself. It wasn't inspired by anything. I just imagined it. It was basically close my eyes and imagine which finger is going to light up, like for a yes. I decided on that basis to apply for a different support worker job, which I ended up getting. Meanwhile, I was starting to go skinny dipping again, a lot. Now, I had already been a couple of times before I went to Ireland, and after that first time, but this time I was waking up and I would have thoughts really pushing me. It's like, yeah, go swimming and stuff. And it was getting a bit obsessive. And it was also getting quite funny about food as well, because I'd started to change my diet. I'd started reducing the amount of carbs that I was eating. And yeah, I was doing a lot of meditating. Not necessarily for long periods, just doing it a lot. And being doing a lot of exercise and stuff. One day I actually managed to stop thinking, which was quite amazing. The thoughts eventually did come back, but, I'd managed to stop thinking. So, yeah, it's possible. I have done it. I've not managed to do it since, but, yeah. The skinny dipping thing, though, got a bit, I don't know, one time I went and there was a dead sheep in the pool that I was swimming in. Now, it's not a stagnant pool or a loch or anything. It's actually part of a river, but it's outside of the main current, so it's safe to swim in, at least when the water's lower in the summer. And this dead sheep was there, and a part of me really didn't want to go for a swim. Actually, before I left that day to go for a swim, I had a thought say, you'll regret this. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? No, I want to go and do this. And so I had second thoughts. I thought, like, do I want to do this? Yeah, okay, let's go and do this. And I went and was just like, I want to go for a swim. And there was this part of me just really didn't want to do it. And I tried like the wee finger thing, and I think it was a no. But I was like, I really want to go. And I saw a white duck, and I took that as like an omen. And I was like, okay, well that should be a sign that I should just go and do it. And I went and did it. And long story short, I was fine. Like, I didn't get any disease or anything like that, but something didn't feel right when my head went into a tailspin. Ultimately, I managed to snap out of it by thinking, okay, well, maybe the reason I shouldn't have gone was to not trigger this part of me, this inner hypochondriac, you could call it. It was what my partner named it. And it was just, that was horrible. And I did start to get, like, I'd start to go to this place to go for a swim. I just feel depressed. Like, get there and just be like, not up for this. Don't feel any enthusiasm whatsoever. Started to feel kind of passionless. Like, I'd go to work on my book or my, writing and things like that, and I would sit and I would be writing stuff, but it's just, I would never be satisfied with it, and I'd be constantly redoing it and things like that. I would also find a lot of the time as well, I would think about going off to do something or start doing something and then have some sort of thoughts or feelings that's like, no, I should be doing something else. Go and do something else and then really regret it. Meanwhile, I actually ended up starting this job as a support worker. And once I got there, felt regret for having taken it on, because I felt, no, I don't want to do this, but I've committed to it, so it's like I have no choice, or like, I can't back out now. It's like, but I was still going off on adventures, mostly by myself. I was finding just going for walks with my partner the way I had before just boring. There was one time whenever it was really windy outside, and thought about going for a walk with my partner, funnily enough, and just wearing a shirt, even though it was windy. I had thoughts say to me, oh, you'll be miserable, you'll hate the sensation. And I was fine. And I saw some mushrooms, and I thought, can I just like try and work out if they're poisonous or not, and just eat them? Because my best friend had introduced me to the concept of just telepathically communicating with the fly agaric mushroom, basically, to ask its permission to, take it, because it's a very sacred mushroom. But at the time, this was 2014, and I was like, what, you can do that? No way. But now I was thinking, like, can I do this to find out if mushrooms are edible? So I started doing that. Started just going around and just sort of like feeling into like these mushrooms, whether I could eat them or not. And I even started to experience them talking to me, telling me to eat them, and sometimes specifically to cook them, which I did. I didn't poison myself doing this at any point. The worst I got was actually from a mushroom that you're supposed to cook it, otherwise it'll give you gas, and that happened. But I didn't get poisoned. I had also had the idea one morning to go and look for the fly agaric, but I responded fearfully, which this had happened before with the skinny dipping thing. Maybe it was still quite early, quite dark outside, and I decided, no, I don't want to go. Like, it might be a bit dangerous. So I reacted with fear. And this was the same with, thoughts telling me to go and look for the fly agaric. There was one day where, I just hid under the covers. Until a certain point, I decided, okay, I'm going to go. And I just, by that point it was raining, and I was like, nah, fuck that, I'm going home. My partner went to Germany again, and I decided to stay behind. This is where I had one of the more interesting experiences. One morning, I woke up, and I had thoughts tell me, right, come on, go and looking for amanitas. And I was like, okay, fine. The day before, I'd been out looking for mushrooms, and I'd had these thoughts tell me, oh, go and drink out of this loch or stream or whatever, and responded, "No, I'm not going to do that because it's not good water. I have actually drank out of it since then. That wasn't a good idea. All I got was diarrhea, thankfully. Nothing worse than that. But yeah, no, I'm glad I didn't do this initially. But they were talking about something like, it's the wild man thing. Now, in this part of the world, we have had these figures called wild men. So Merlin is based off of a figure like this, and there's an Irish one as well, Sweeney Gelt. He went mad after a monk cursed him. The Merlin figure went mad after a battle. I'd read about this in a book that I have, and yeah, there's this wild man thing. And this morning, when I woke up and had thoughts telling me to go and look for them, I wondered about the wild man thing, and I consulted the tarot cards, and they seemed to be rather encouraging. So I was like, okay, let's go and do this. Got into my car and was thinking, I had thoughts tell me, you're going to have to eat it raw. And it's a hallucinogenic mushroom. So like, I drive out to somewhere and eat a hallucinogenic mushroom, and then I have to drive back. It's like, that seems a bit, I don't know if I want to do that. Also, I'd work the next day, so camping was probably not on the menu for me. And I wondered to myself, like, okay, why should I go and do this? The answer that came to mind was duty. And I thought, okay, fine. And I turned on the ignition and the time was 10:10. I have not mentioned this up until this point, but I've come across the concept of mirror numbers. The most common one is 1111. It's considered a good omen. The way that it tends to work for me, I know this isn't necessarily the case for everybody, but the ones like 1010, 1111, well, 1111 can't really work any other way, but for 1010 or 1212, these are all like, I take them as green lights basically. But then there are others like 1001 and 1221 and so on. And I take them as like deterrents. So I had no idea what time it was. I got into the habit of not checking the time when I get up because of the mirror number thing. So yeah, decided I'm going to go and do this. Turned on the ignition. It was 10:10. It was like, okay, yeah, this is happening. And I had thoughts say to me, yeah, go back and get your camping stuff. Yeah. And I ask these thoughts like, why do you want me to go and get my camping stuff? It's like, it's to keep you safe. It's like, okay, right. And then, I went out. I was meant to meet with my dad this day, go for a walk with him, but I texted him and said to him, nope, sorry, I'm going off on my own today. And I came across one spot. No, I'm not going to go here. No, we'll get in the car, go to the a main car park bit. I was like, no, it's not here either. Drove to another part. I was like, yeah, I'm going to try this. Went through, found a stream, a clean stream to drink from because it's in the Highlands and the water there's much cleaner. And I turned around and there was a fly agaric right there. Things went south though as soon as I approached the thing because I was so overwhelmed, and I was like, oh my god, he called me and I came, and I was just like prostrating myself over this tiny mushroom, and it was just I was like, it's like, well, I guess I'm here to eat you. So I bent down and I heard a voice say to me, don't eat me. I was like, I thought I was supposed to. I then decided to ask the mushrooms, like, can I eat you? And I had a thought say yes. So this is a problem if you're trying to practice telepathy, which is that, how do you tell the difference between what you're trying to communicate with and like your own thoughts in your own head? Some people don't even believe that telepathy is possible, such as a doctor I had to speak to at a later point, which I'll get to. I decided, okay, yeah, I'm going to eat it. I bent down and I noticed a siren off in the distance, like a police car or an ambulance or something. So I thought, is that a sign to not do this? I don't know. But I went and ate it anyway. And then immediately it was like, oh my god, what have I done? I felt really bad about it. And yeah, it was just, again, it was asking for forgiveness. And I had thoughts, whether it was the mushroom or my own thoughts, I don't know, say to me something that's like, I forgive you, but like, could you forgive yourself? And I walked along and, just looked for edible mushrooms now. And then I started to think about what had happened. And I started to wonder, oh, well, maybe the don't eat me thing, maybe that was my own mind tricking me, into not eating it. And then I got into a pretty, what I would call, creepy state. Predatory. Like, I decided, that I wanted to go after this mushroom. So I went up to it and bent down to take a bite out of it. And I had a thought say, "You're bad." And I just thought, fuck you. Just jumped on the whole thing. Now I felt very bad. Wandered around and just ended up eating more mushrooms. And actually, at one point, I thought, right, okay, no, just try and get into the state that you were in at the start of the day. Immediately found another fly agaric, and this time I was just like, no, I'm just going to eat it. I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to do any of it. No, I'm just going to eat it. Okay, and then just move on to other mushrooms. And then I went home. I'd remembered a few mushrooms that I'd eaten. And I was like, oh, they looked a bit funny. Looked them up. And I thought that what I remember eating looked quite similar to funeral bells, which are deadly. And then I thought to myself, shit, what have I done? I consulted the oracle cards, asked my spirit guides, what do I do? I got the whale again. Okay, that's helpful. It was actually pretty spooky because basically the way that I had interpreted this was that I felt as if I'd eaten this fly agaric mushroom, that it did not want to be eaten, and that the punishment was that I had inadvertently eaten deadly mushrooms. And so I was going to die, and that it was the right thing for me not to go to the hospital, but to simply stay at home and suffer a horrible, painful death. Interestingly enough, as I was looking up, trying to find out about these mushrooms and things like that, I kept seeing mirror numbers. It was now very late in the night. It was 12:12 and 01:01 a.m. I ultimately decided I'm just going to go to bed. I'm not going to go to the hospital. And the next morning I woke up and decided to record a video because I'd been meaning to at this point, and it was like, this is my last will and testament or what have you. Just, yep, this is what's happened to me. It's like, yeah, and I'm choosing to die because this is the punishment, as it were. And I started driving, and I decided, no, I'm going to go to the hospital. But I couldn't get myself to go to the hospital. Eventually, my father showed up because my partner had tried to contact me, and she hadn't managed, so she contacted him, and he asked me what happened, and I told him, well, I've eaten deadly mushroom, and he's like, right, we're going to the hospital then. So I was like, right, okay, we're going to the hospital. And we went to the A&E, and I had thought saying, you're going to the loony bin for this, and I was thinking, man, I really, really should have listened to Heidi Priebe talking about building structure for myself, because I had been living this just completely chaotic way, and it seemed as if it was really affecting my mental health. And I, got into the treatment room, and I was thinking, how am I going to react to what's coming? Because I'm afraid of what they're going to do to me. Fight, which not literally fight them, just deal with whatever's coming, or flight, as in run away. The thought that responded said fight. But I ran away. I got up and got out the door and ran out. And then I ran back, and then my dad was like, "What the hell why did you do that?" The nurse had come in and I was gone, and eventually came back. She tested me. By this point, it was clear that I had not been poisoned, because it had been long enough that I would show symptoms by now if it was funeral bells that I had eaten. So she asked, "Are you okay mentally?" And I responded, "Yeah, no, I don't need any help. I'm fine." The next day, things seemed to be rather normal. And my mother actually phoned me and I talked to her. And then once I put the phone down, then I had thought say to me, right, it's time to go camping. And I asked, sorry, who are you? The answer was Woden. So I wasn't sure about this. And I had everybody around me basically saying, it's like, look, just go back to your job. Because they had tried to phone me that day, the day before, when I was meant to go in, and I didn't. My phone died, and I didn't bother answering because I thought I was going to die, so there'd be no point going to work. And I decided ultimately, no, I'm not going to go camping. No. And I woke up the next morning, asked myself, how can I show up for myself today? And the answer was go for a run. And I decided, nah, fuck that. And I decided to read about the wild man thing and read that if you refuse the call of the wild or what have you, you can go mad. So I decided to just start acting like an idiot. One of my friends phoned me and I was babbling away to him. He could tell I was putting it on. So I stopped, but then I actually did have a mental breakdown over the phone with this guy. That wasn't fun. Then I thought to myself, I don't know if I want this job anymore. And the time happened to be 12:12. So that was interesting. My work phoned me, I think the day after, asking if it was coming in, and I told them, I don't know. Don't know if I'm going to. I also had an appointment with the job centre that day. And I asked myself, why do you want this job? The answer was slavery. So I thought that was interesting. And I left, went to the job centre. As I was crossing the roads, a random woman said something interesting to me. She was like, run, rabbit, run. So I was trying to get across the road quickly before the lights changed. And I started to wonder to myself. And eventually I got to the job centre and I was thinking, oh, do I want to go in? And I noticed there's a cafe, I think, nearby. It's called the Rabbit Hole or something like that. But you're not really meant to just not go to these appointments. So I went in and I had talked to my boss and told her that I was struggling a bit. And she recommended, we could do something more flexible, like, just shifts that I choose or something like that. And I mentioned this to it wasn't my usual work coach, it was somebody else, that I was thinking of reducing my hours. And she told me, well, you're not going to be doing that. We want you to be working full time. And if you do try and reduce your hours, you could get your benefits cut. So didn't want that to happen. But when my boss phoned me the next day, I couldn't quit or agree to go in. I couldn't decide. Didn't want to decide. And I think the day after that, I was meant to go into work. And I woke up that day thinking, oh shit, what have you done? You've blown it. You've lost this job. And I was just considering, man, it's like how arrogant and selfish I'd been and so on. It was just like, yeah, terrible. And I phoned up my work. My boss wasn't in that day. And I asked them if I was still on the rota, and they said, yeah, just come in. So I was clearly delusional. No, I had not lost the job just because I hadn't got back to my boss about whether I wanted to go in again or not. And I sat with myself and I was like, right, okay, you've clearly not had a realistic assessment of the situation. Right, think about it. Who is this job actually serving? Your ego or humanity? Are you actually doing a service to humanity by, supporting vulnerable people, with their mental health? And I actually got excited about the idea of quitting. And I decided, yeah, I'm going to quit. Picked up the phone, it was 12:12. So I phoned in and was like, yeah, I quit. And once I put it down, I thought to myself, right, it's time to get started on my project. I might as well now. And then I had thought to say, go to the woods. And I asked why. The answer was meditation, enlightenment. So I started driving out, and I did what I had been increasingly doing at this point. I was driving out and then like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, changing my mind, and then, went and picked up something to eat, went home, and then drove back out. And it wasn't a very satisfying experience. And it also happened to have been the autumn equinox that day. And I wondered if I had perhaps missed an opportunity, or because the actual equinox itself had been earlier on in the day. I think I was maybe a bit sore over the whole, the manifesting on the ferry to Ireland kind of thing. So I had developed this real thing about, astrology and timings, because it just so happened that day when I was going over to Ireland, the full moon was transiting my 10th house. So yeah, I got a bit too into astrology, a bit too fixated on it. And the next day I woke up thinking, shit, what have you done? You've actually quit the job. Man, that's so terrible. How could you quit? I thought to myself as well, it's like you just saw a number and you thought that meant you should quit. So starting to turn on my own, personal belief system, because of course it's not rational, it's intuitive. So some people don't believe that's real. That's what I've been taught my whole life, that stuff isn't real. So my boss phoned me and asked, so I hear you want to quit. And I said to her, I don't know. She said, if you do want to quit, you need to send us an email. That's the procedure this organization goes through. And I was like, right, okay, yeah, I'm gonna quit. I turned on my computer. There was no mirror number or anything like that. So I couldn't go through with it because I didn't have that confirmation that it was the right thing for me to do. So I just couldn't decide. Spent the whole day in indecision. Next morning, I got an email saying that I was going to be taken off of the payroll and that I had time to phone up, not my boss, but, or maybe her, but somebody from the human resources to stop that from happening. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't decide. Eventually, I watched a video by Teal Swan saying, think about what you really want. And the conclusion that I came to that what I want is responsibility. So I decided, actually, this job can give me responsibility, that I was never given as a child, for example. My parents didn't trust me to be responsible. So I phoned up this woman from the human resources team, and she'd finished work that day. And I thought, shit, blown it. That's it, I've lost the job. Went to pick up my partner from the airport. This time feeling very deflated, like utter failure, egotistic, arrogant prick. Woke up the next morning thinking, God, well, I'm going to need to take responsibility somehow, aren't I? But maybe I have a chance. So I phoned up this woman from the human resources team, and I asked her if I was still on the payroll, and it turns out she hadn't actually taken me off yet. But she did ask me, why did you apply for this job? And I told her I kind of had to, because that's what you need to do when you're on universal credit. And she pointed out that it's a vocation. You need to be pretty committed to it, which that was actually one of my reservations about going for it, was the fact, that level of commitment, basically. So she asked me, well, what's your gut feeling? But I couldn't tell at the time. Like, I didn't have it. I wasn't perceiving an instinctive response to this. I just said to her, I don't know. So yeah, never mind the fact that I got really excited. I felt butterflies in my stomach when I thought about quitting, and I got like a synchronicity to confirm. It's like, no, I don't know. Because I was so afraid that if I quit this job, benefits would get, and just like I would have to explain to my mother and everything. And she would be like, why did you quit? It's like, because you saw a number or something like that. And I was afraid I would have to end up living with her. Then my partner, I would end up having to split up with my partner or whatever. So, but this kind woman that I was talking to said, well, my gut feeling from her perspective is that this job is not right for you. But it's not up to me, it's up to you. So would you like more time to think about it? I was like, yes. And I hung up the phone, and the call had lasted 20 minutes and 2 seconds. So that's 20:02. The way that I interpreted this was, I thought this meant that whichever decision I made would be the wrong one. And I snapped. I had thoughts telling me to kill myself a few days before this. And at that point, I was like, what? No, that's ridiculous. Why the hell would I do that? No. Now, though, I thought, no, that's it. I can't handle this, basically, is what it was. Just basically the way that I thought about it was either I abdicate responsibility by not taking the job, or I gaslight myself about my experience of having got really excited about quitting and then seen a mirror number, and also saw a mirror number when I thought about whether I should quit. The problem there, though, was that I asked the tarot cards about what this experience of having that thought and seeing that mirror number meant for me. I got the Tower and the Ten of Swords. which are pretty dramatic. And that put the fear in me, like the fear that if I quit this job, something really bad would happen. And I decided the only reasonable course of action at this point was to walk to a local river and just walk into it and drown myself. People were starting to notice because I was wandering around muttering to myself, and one man even asked if I was okay, and I answered, "Not really." So he phoned the police. I could tell that's what he was doing. I just thought, whatever. I completely snapped. But I actually managed to snap out of it. I thought, man, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. You need to go home and quit this job and start thinking about your mental health. But as I was walking home, the police showed up. They asked what I was doing, and I was just straight up with them. I was like, I was planning to kill myself, but I changed my mind, you know. And at first I thought they had said to me that they would let me walk home on my own. But after I'd finished explaining to them, they said, "We'll take you back home," which immediately made me very distrustful, because I thought they'd told me one thing and then were telling me something else. And I was thinking, oh shit, they've got me now, you know. And they actually didn't take me straight home because they had to pick up somebody else at a bridge that was going over the river. They might also have been suicidal, I have no idea. But when we got to the bridge and they got out of the car to go and get some other person, I had these thoughts saying to me, is like, you know, you're going to have to speak to a mental health professional, and you're going to have to tell them about the mirror numbers, and they're going to think you're crazy, and they're going to lock you up. There's the door. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to go and do it. Ran out the door, ran towards the bridge to jump off it. Thankfully, the policewoman came and grabbed me, and a local bystander as well. I got cuffed, tried to slip out the cuffs, and then got the cuffs on tighter. The policeman was like, "Yeah, don't fuck with us." That's a funny memory, but I mean, oh God, it was so fucked up. And they took me back to the police station. Although they didn't actually take me in, they just got me on the phone with a psychiatrist or someone like that. And I told them what had happened, and they thought that what I did sounded much more impulsive. They didn't think that I was necessarily suicidal in the usual sense, and I would kind of agree with that. Like, I don't think I would have tried to actually jump off the bridge if the police hadn't showed up. I think it would be more than likely that I would have actually ended up just going home. But, you know, I can't blame them for, you know, they're just doing their job, what have you. But yeah, they ended up taking me home. The remainder of 2024 for me, going into 2025, may well be the darkest period of my life. I became properly depressed now. I struggled to get myself out of bed a couple of days. Started crying for no reason. And would go into these states that my partner called deranged. You could also call them dissociated. I would just start whispering and muttering to myself. Overall, life became extremely unpleasant. At first, though, I wasn't, you know, the idea of suicide was not, I wasn't thinking much about. But I really struggled to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't able to quit, like follow through with quitting that job. And I was still going out by myself, you know, trying to have adventures and things like that. But I mean, if before it was kind of like a toss-up as to whether they would be fun or not, like this time they never were. I would have an idea and then think, oh, do I want to do that? Do I want to do that? And, you know, maybe I wouldn't do it and then probably regret not doing it. But then if I would decide to do it, I would drive out and I would change my mind and start heading home. But then decide, oh no, actually change my mind again. And maybe could just do this for hours and hours. All the while just not being in my own head, not enjoying myself. I would go out in the middle of the night to meditate and just being in my own head, ruminating, as they say, about depressed people. To try and help this, my partner suggested that I try magic mushrooms. I agreed. I thought it was a good idea as well. The thing is, though, there's different ways to take them. I had been used to taking larger quantities to go on trips. But this was a different situation. And I was also aware of the possibility of microdosing, because a lot of people that are depressed can end up finding that helpful, maybe than taking a larger dose. But I was also aware that I was pretty afraid of taking a larger dose because of what could happen potentially. I ultimately decided, after we'd picked some out in nature, to just eat them all. And then I immediately regretted it. I was like, no, I wish I hadn't have done that. I wish I'd have kept them to microdose them. It wasn't that bad. I started to feel the effects coming on. My partner tried to talk me through my issues, and I just wasn't up for it. And that was that, really. It was kind of a dud experience. The second time was much worse. I didn't end up doing anything ridiculous or anything like that. It was just horrible. It was just a bad trip. It took place here, and I took a much larger dose. And we tried the same thing, and I just saw bugs and spiders and weird ghouly things and just had a horrible time. And I was still not at all open to working through anything. Ironically enough, my partner felt as if I actually improved after this somewhat. So maybe it wasn't that bad after all. But I think possibly part of the reason why I had such a bad time was because I have read about what people could call the dark side of psychedelics. Set and setting is important. Bad trips can happen. And I think possibly if you're in the grip of depression, microdosing may be a better idea than taking a particularly large dose. Don't want to give advice either way. I think it probably depends on how open you are to healing. And at this point, I think I was maybe just that bit still too tender from having tried to kill myself that no, it wasn't going to happen for me at that time. Yeah, the decision-making thing was getting kind of bad as well. I was spending a lot more time with my partner, even though I was still going out. My partner suggested that I roll a die to make my decisions to make it easier. That didn't go very well for me, because sometimes I would roll a die and have a particular outcome, and I'd be like, okay, well, I'll go with that, and then I wouldn't be happy with the result. So my way of trying to make this work for me is like, okay, I'm going to do a magic ritual to attune this die to my intuition or divine will. I guess I considered it kind of the same. And so, yeah, that's my act of surrender, as it were. I would get up very early in the morning to try and get out to a body of water for dawn to carry out this ritual. And I tried this a few times, but the last time that I tried it didn't go very well, because I did it, and then I immediately tried to use it to make a decision. It's like, okay, well, maybe I want to go for a walk here. It's a nice woods near where I live. So am I going to go? Yeah, I'll go for a walk. Okay. And then I sort of kept feeling unsure about it. So it was like, Roland, oh yeah, keep going, and I kept walking, and got to a certain stage where I was satisfied with that, and, I'd had enough, and I was like, okay, well, it's time to go back now. Something didn't feel quite right. So I didn't really know what time it was, but I was thinking, I'm going to see 10:01 when I get into the car. And I did. And I was thinking, shit, well, I kind of just want to go home. But this is usually a sign that I should not carry through with my intentions. Oh, but I just want to go home. So I started driving home, and I ended up driving across a bridge that goes across the river. And at that point, I don't really want to go into detail about exactly what happened, but I did, at this point, consider getting out of the car and jumping off the bridge. And I ultimately decided against it, but I decided the next best thing I could do would be to break up with my partner, because maybe she was better off without me. And I said this to her, and then immediately regretted it, and nothing really came of it. It was strange how, I was saying and doing things which seemed to have been coming from a very negative place, but were ultimately, I suppose, inconsequential. I also started compulsively cord cutting with a particular entity whose name I'm not going to mention, but I tried this a few times, always feeling like I was missing the correct time at dawn. But I eventually managed to do it at a certain point, and once I did the ritual, I felt very afraid. For some reason. I don't know why. That was that. I wasn't really getting better, and my parents were starting to worry about me. My mother had thought I should undergo therapy, and I mentioned the possibility of doing some sort of family constellation. You should look into those. They're very interesting. I've done a few now, and I think they're very helpful. At first, I didn't really want to do it. I was like, no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about it. But at a certain point, my mother was quite insistent that I come over. But whenever I was looking at planes to go over, I saw a reversed mirror number, and it was like, no, I'm not going over. So she came here, and the whole idea of whether I would go back with her or not was, I suppose, something that she felt quite strongly about, but I insisted, no, I don't want to. One day, though, this was the day before she was due to go back, we were in a shop, and I saw something that emotionally triggered me and burst into tears, and this really perturbed her, and she was quite insistent. She was like, you need to go to A&E, like, this isn't good. And I was like, no, this isn't necessary, like. But the next morning, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go back with her or not. So I packed my things, just so that I at least had the option if I decided I wanted to. And then she was asking me, well, you want to go or not? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And by this point, my partner had had enough. She was feeling very overwhelmed by what I was doing. And she was basically just like, look, you either check yourself into A&E here or go back with your mother. And I ended up doing that. But of course, once we got to the ferry terminal, I started regretting that and feeling, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. So it's this thing of just feeling like whatever I do is wrong, kind of thing. The next day, over in Ireland, my mother took me to see a counsellor. There is an administrative procedure as part of the counselling, and I had thoughts tell me not to go through with it, but I did because I didn't want to make a fuss about it. I didn't feel very good about it. When I got back into the car with my mother, time was 14:41, and I was like, this isn't good at all. This is bad. And yeah, she was quite frightened by how it was behaving. So she contacted her cousin, who's a GP. But I explained to him, how I was feeling about everything. And in his professional opinion, he didn't think I needed to go to A&E. And he also told me that, they don't actually like taking people into mental hospitals if they can help it. I don't know if I mentioned that I had thoughts telling me not to eat. So that was something that would just become more and more of a thing over time, that I would just not be eating very much. At some point, I had thoughts telling me to go to a local lake near where my mother lives, and I asked why. And the answer was redemption. So perhaps I felt like I had betrayed myself by agreeing to undergo counselling when maybe I didn't want to. So went out to the lake, and I totally forgot that a storm had been predicted. So I was sitting there, and a thought told me, you're staying until sunrise. I did want to go home a few points, but I didn't. And then the storm properly started, and there's thankfully a shelter, so I just stayed in there for the whole night. And was just in my head watching conversations between my thoughts, and it was horrible. It was just a horrible experience. And I did have thoughts say, look, just go back to the house, you're going to worry your mother. But no, stayed until sunrise. And she came to collect me because I hadn't taken my phone with me. And I ended up at A&E, which again was something I don't think I wanted to do. I had a thought tell me not to do it, but I did it. And then immediately regretted it. Felt very resentful towards my mother as well because she insisted that I do so. And I talked to the nurse, and told him that I thought I was depressed. He seemed to think what I was telling him sounded more like psychosis, so he just gave me a bunch of antipsychotics, which I didn't take. And the next day was the family constellation, which was probably one of the few moments of joy. I got on really well with the other people there. And yeah, it was overall, I think, a fruitful experience for me. But over the next few weeks, I would be then seen by the home team. This is the psychiatric services in this country. I spoke to the consultant, who I had thoughts telling me not to talk to, but I ended up doing so, and he actually seemed pretty dead on. And unlike the nurse that I first saw, he was actually quite reluctant to just slap a label on me because I told him about my experiences and he had no idea what to make of it. He was actually quite curious to learn more. And yeah, over the next few weeks, I would be being seen by the home team. Meanwhile, I kept trying to go out to this lake. I would have thoughts tell me to go. And my mother would keep trying to keep me from going. And I had one really awful time of just like, yeah, but a nurse from the home team like trying to get me to, swear not to go, and I did, and then I felt it was like, oh my god, I've just betrayed myself and all this kind of stuff. Eventually, I did convince my mother to let me go, and I started not just meditating, but actually like meditating naked to feel cold. It's just something I really felt like doing. I know there's other people do this. I think Wim Hof is probably the most famous example, but I've never watched anything about him really. I just know of him. I just felt inclined to do this, sitting in the frost or the wind, and sometimes the rain, although the rain I feel like I can have the most trouble with doing this. And yeah, I don't know, it's just something that I was doing, but there was a lot of strange things going on in my own head around this kind of thing. I eventually became quite resistant to doing it, which I'm kind of not surprised, because there was a few times where I just stayed out all night, doing this. This was after a nurse from the home team had basically convinced my mother to just not try and restrain me from going, because in her opinion, she thought that my mother trying to keep me from going was feeding into this, I don't know, like a deviant personality pattern or something like that I was acting out, or like this defiant, rebellious kind of thing, which I think is probably the case, to be honest. But yeah, it's because once she was like, okay, fine, just go, I was like, oh shit, I've got to go, because I kept having experiences like seeing mirror numbers. I would think, I thought would tell me go out to the lake, and then I would see 1919 or something like that. So, but then I started going, but there were a few nights where I spent the whole night, and there was one actually where my little toe got numb from sitting out in the frost all night. Other than that, though, didn't get hypothermia. I was quite amazed actually at how well my body was able to deal with just sitting in the cold all night. But at a certain point, though, I would go to do this, and then it would get like taken over by this weird, shady character who was just like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to go home. And it would have all these narratives going on in my head about like, oh, you're betraying yourself and your ideals and your inner child and all this kind of stuff. It was so bizarre and so dark as well a lot of the time. And yeah, it was just what it was like in my world for a good while. Wasn't fun at all. And yeah, the fasting also ended up causing binge eating as well, because once I did eat, I would just keep eating like there was no tomorrow. And my mother also had cereal and biscuits in the house, which I would usually not buy, but since she had them, I just ate that as well. So yeah, I got into quite bad eating patterns of fasting and binging. This just sort of went on for a while. Eventually, my appointments with the home team weren't really going anywhere. They couldn't figure out whether I was depressed or psychotic or whatever, and they they just put it to me, do you want treatment? Do you want medication and therapy? And I was like, no, I didn't want any of this in the first place, really, even though obviously agreed to go along with it. But they couldn't make me, so... But, of course, there was one last administrative procedure that they wanted me to undergo, and this time I was a bit more resistant. I was like, I can refuse, though. I don't really want to, but the nurse and my mother actually pressured me into doing it, and I ended up doing it. I felt this very strong sinking feeling in my sacrum area. That was horrible. After that, though, things seemed to improve. Slowly but surely, I spent Christmas and New Year there. My partner came over, and this kind of thing with, I guess, thoughts telling me to go out to this lake, and then me either going or just not wanting to go or whatever. This continued right the way until I came home as well. Sometimes I would just stay under the covers in bed all day. Meanwhile, I underwent another health assessment with Universal Credit, and eventually they found me of limited capability for work, so I don't have to look for a job. I can just get on with my projects and so on, and just do the best I can. And I think gradually I've started to get the hang of this, like, going outside and meditating naked kind of thing, because I'm sure at times I was overdoing it, but resisting it I don't think has always been the best course of action either. Sometimes I would start doing it and they'd be like, oh no, I don't want to do this, and then maybe check the time and it was like 12:21 or something. But there was one time whenever I went out camping and I was meditating naked in the wind, and I tried to just relax into it, to not resist the cold wind on my skin for a time, and then when I got a bit too uncomfortable, then I put my clothes on. And I didn't know what the time was, but when I turned on my phone, it was 11:11. So that showed me not to be too hard on myself. I've also done a few cord cuttings as well. And over time, it seems like I've gotten better at learning how to actually love myself. I did actually end up seeing a therapist here in Scotland. And initially I was well up for this because I was contacting her through text, and I received one of her texts at 5:05, so I took this as a sign. But then after the first couple of sessions, I started wondering about it. And I remember one time driving out to a session. Actually, I had my partner with me, and I had these thoughts telling me to go to the woods. And I was like, no, I need therapy. But then another thought was like, no, you don't. And I looked at the track list and saw it was like 0202 or something, which wasn't the time. It was more like the running time on a track that we were listening to on the CD. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I went to that session, but then the last one that I went to, I went along to her, and I thought to myself before I got out of the car, I was like, okay, what am I going to be more happy with? Just imagine myself. Am I going to be happier with going in for the session, or saying to her, look, it's fine, I'll try and manage on my own? And I decided to do the latter. But when I got back into the car, I brought all my stuff to go camping, which I'd been doing a lot of. But as I drove out somewhere to go camp, the resistance kicked in because it was lashing it down with the rain. And it was like, no, fuck that. And I just drove into a co-op and just, I bought some cream, guzzled down that, and then I just completely gave up on the keto thing and bought a bunch of biscuits and stuff like that. And that actually started a phase I went through where, I had been doing that sort of thing in Ireland, but once I came back, I went on to like a fairly strict keto diet again. Now I was really in a phase of eating that, like, cereal and biscuits basically. And yeah, the eating thing gradually managed to sort out. I'm no longer fasting and binging. I am just pretty much eating when I get hungry. that's that basically been sorted. I kind of had to admit to myself, it's like, no, I don't like fasting. I know it's good for you. I know it's healthy, and I'm not trying to put anyone off of doing it who's getting good results from it. But for me personally, at this point in my life, I've done lots of it. It was even dry fasting at points as well when I was going out camping and stuff. And it's helped in the sense that it's maybe helped me become a little bit, be able to deal with hunger a bit better. Like I would get really hangry a lot of the time before. And maybe I still can, but I might be better at dealing with it now. For the time being, though, it's like I don't really fast much anymore. Sometimes I just don't really feel like eating. I don't feel that hungry. But yeah, so that's that basically. I still struggle, not as much as I did. It still feels tough adjusting to this new reality that I have, but it feels overall, I don't know, like I feel better in myself, about myself. That's how I've managed to get myself out of this bad situation. Obviously, I've had lots of support. My partner has been very helpful, although I've also realized as well there was ways in which I don't want to go into detail, but probably just maybe being a bit too reliant for sorting through my own problems. But either way, the point is, yeah, I feel like I'm doing much better. And I'm aware at this point that I'm not the only person that's gone through experiences like this. If any of my story is similar to anything that you've experienced, let me know in the comments. Hopefully, from this point, I can talk about subjects other than myself. I just wanted to do these introductory videos just to give you an idea of who I am and the kind of experiences that I've had, the sort of things I'm interested in. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, hopefully I will see you again soon. Cheers.